My beloved child. Pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not placed before you by accident. Something has shifted in the heart of the person connected to you, and the change began with a story, an important story about you that they were never supposed to hear in the way they heard it. Do not rush away from these words. There is a reason your spirit felt drawn here, a reason your eyes stopped on this message, and a reason heaven is asking you to remain still long enough to understand what has been unfolding beyond your sight. Your soulmate thought they already understood you. They believed they knew the shape of your heart, the meaning behind your silence, and the reasons you sometimes pulled away when emotions became too heavy. They had formed an image of you from scattered moments, unfinished conversations, other people's opinions, and the guarded way you carried yourself. But that image was incomplete. It was missing the part of your story that explained everything. Then someone spoke. It did not happen in a dramatic room filled with people. There was no announcement, no carefully prepared speech, and no warning that something life-changing was about to be revealed. It began quietly. Your soulmate was listening to a conversation that seemed ordinary at first. A familiar name was mentioned. A memory surfaced. Then, without realizing the weight of what they were about to say, someone began telling a story about you. At first, your soulmate remained calm. They did not expect the story to reach them so deeply. They believed it would be another small detail, another passing account of something you once did or said. But as the story unfolded, their expression changed. Their attention sharpened. The noise around them seemed to fade, because the person speaking was revealing a side of you that your soulmate had never been shown. They heard about a moment when you were carrying more pain than anyone knew, yet you still chose to help someone else. They heard how you stood beside a person who had nothing to offer you in return. They heard that while others were judging you from a distance, you were quietly fighting a battle that would have broken many people. And instead of becoming cruel, you became more compassionate. That detail unsettled them. It unsettled them because they suddenly realized that some of the things they had misunderstood about you were not signs that you did not care. They were signs that you cared so deeply that you had learned to hide it. Your silence was not emptiness. It was protection. Your distance was not rejection. It was the instinct of a heart that had once opened completely and paid a painful price for doing so. Your soulmate did not interrupt the story. They could not. Something inside them was being rearranged with every sentence. Memories of you began returning to their mind, but now those memories carried a different meaning. The times you looked away while pretending to be fine. The moments you almost said something but changed your mind. The way you offered kindness without asking to be recognized. The way your strength sometimes looked like coldness to people who did not understand what it cost you to remain standing. For the first time, they were seeing the truth behind your behavior. And then the storyteller revealed something even more personal. They described a choice you once made, a choice that protected someone else while leaving you to carry the consequences alone. You never advertised it. You never used it to gain sympathy. You allowed people to believe an easier version of events because explaining the truth would have exposed someone you still wanted to protect. You accepted misunderstanding rather than cause more damage. When your soulmate heard this, their heart became heavy. They remembered times when they had questioned your intentions. They remembered moments when they listened to doubt instead of listening to the quiet certainty they felt whenever they were near you. They remembered how easily they had accepted incomplete explanations. And now they were forced to confront a painful possibility. Perhaps you had been more loyal than they deserved, more sincere than they recognized, and more wounded than they ever imagined. My child, this was the moment something began to change. Not on the surface. Not yet. No message was sent immediately. No confession was made. No sudden declaration reached you. But deep within your soulmate, a wall began to crack. A wall built from fear, pride, confusion, and the influence of voices that did not understand your connection. They had been trying to reduce what they felt for you into something manageable. They told themselves it was only curiosity. They called it nostalgia. They tried to convince themselves that the pull toward you would eventually disappear. But the story they heard made that impossible, because it confirmed what their soul had been whispering all along. There was more to you than they had allowed themselves to believe. And there was more to this connection than they had been willing to admit. Stay with these words, because the most important part has not yet been revealed. The story did not only describe your past. It exposed something about your soulmate's present. It forced them to recognize why they had been restless, why your name returned to their thoughts at unexpected hours, and why no amount of distraction could fully remove your presence from their heart. They began asking questions. Not aloud at first. The questions rose silently within them. Why did no one tell me this before? Why did I believe the wrong version? Why did I not ask them directly? Why did I assume their silence meant they had nothing to say? And the question that frightened them most was this: have I already pushed away the one person whose heart was genuine with me? That question followed them after the conversation ended. It followed them into the quiet. It remained when they were alone. They tried to focus on ordinary things, but the story replayed in fragments. A sentence. A detail. A moment from your life they had never known about. Each piece opened another door, and behind every door was a new understanding of you. They saw your strength differently. Before, they may have thought you were simply independent. Now they understood that your independence had been shaped by moments when no one came to rescue you. They may have thought you did not need reassurance. Now they realized you had simply grown accustomed to calming your own heart. They may have thought your standards were too high. Now they understood that you were not asking for perfection. You were asking for consistency because inconsistency had wounded you before. Your soulmate began to feel the weight of every moment when you were trying to be understood but did not have the words to explain yourself. Something softened in them. The part of them that had resisted you began to lose its strength. The excuses they used to create emotional distance no longer sounded convincing. The story had revealed that your heart was not dangerous. It was precious. The real danger was losing access to it through hesitation, pride, or fear. My beloved, heaven has seen the moments when you wondered whether your truth would ever be known. You have watched people misunderstand your intentions, judge your quietness, and overlook the depth of what you gave. There were times when you wanted to defend yourself, but something inside you said, let time reveal what words cannot. That time has begun. The truth did not reach your soulmate because you forced it into their hands. It reached them through an unexpected voice, in an unexpected moment, when their heart was finally vulnerable enough to receive it. What you could not explain without sounding desperate was revealed naturally. What you feared would remain hidden was carried directly to the person who needed to hear it. But this was not the only reason the story mattered. There was one specific detail that struck your soulmate more deeply than everything else. It was a small detail, perhaps something you barely remember. To others, it might have sounded insignificant. But to your soulmate, it changed the emotional meaning of your entire connection. The storyteller mentioned something you said during a difficult season. You had spoken about love, loyalty, and what it means to remain sincere even when someone cannot see your sincerity yet. You said that real care does not disappear simply because it is misunderstood. You said that sometimes the strongest love is the love that refuses to become bitter. When your soulmate heard those words, they became very still. They recognized you in that statement. More than that, they recognized themselves. They realized there had been moments when you could have exposed them, embarrassed them, or spoken harshly about their mistakes. Yet you did not. Even when you felt wounded, you protected the dignity of the connection. You may have stepped back, but you did not turn your pain into revenge. You carried your disappointment privately while still hoping they would one day awaken to the truth. And now they were awakening. Not fully, but enough for the first light to enter. They began remembering your patience. They remembered the way you tried to understand them even when they could not explain themselves. They remembered how you noticed what they were feeling before they spoke. They remembered the subtle kindnesses, the quiet concern, and the way your presence made them feel seen. Those memories had always been there. But now the story gave them meaning. Your soulmate began to understand that your connection was not powerful because it was easy. It was powerful because it kept revealing truth. Every misunderstanding uncovered a wound that needed healing. Every distance exposed what still mattered. Every silence became a mirror. And now, through this story, they were being shown the cost of continuing to avoid what their heart already knew. Something within them said, "You cannot keep pretending this person means nothing." That thought frightened them, but it also brought relief. For so long, they had been fighting an invisible battle between what they felt and what they thought they should feel. They may have listened to people who advised them to be careful. They may have carried old fears from relationships that taught them not to trust easily. They may have believed that admitting the depth of their emotions would make them weak. But the story about you did something no argument could do. It made them feel safe enough to reconsider. It showed them that your heart had endured pain without losing its capacity for love. It showed them that you were not searching for someone to complete you. You were searching for someone brave enough to meet you honestly. It showed them that your love was not a trap. It was an invitation to become more real. And suddenly, your soulmate began to wonder what might happen if they stopped running from that invitation. They imagined speaking to you without masks. They imagined telling you what they had been afraid to admit. They imagined apologizing for assumptions they made without knowing the whole story. They imagined what your eyes might look like if you finally heard the truth from them. But then another emotion entered. Regret. Regret for the time lost. Regret for the moments they chose silence when their soul wanted connection. Regret for the occasions when they allowed pride to speak louder than affection. They thought about how close they may have come to losing you without ever giving you the honesty you deserved. This regret did not arrive to punish them. It arrived to awaken them. There are moments, my child, when the heart must feel the possibility of loss before it understands the value of what stands before it. Not because love should be built on fear, but because comfort can make people careless. Your soulmate had grown accustomed to the idea that your energy would always be available, that your heart would remain open, and that there would always be another chance to say what had not been said. The story disturbed that assumption. It made them realize that a person like you does not remain in the same place forever. You may love deeply, but you are also learning to choose. Peace. You may forgive, but you are no longer willing to abandon yourself to prove your devotion. You may still feel the connection, but you have begun to understand that divine love must include respect, clarity, and courage. Your soulmate sensed this shift in you even before hearing the story. They felt your energy changing. They noticed that the emotional door they once assumed would always remain open had become quieter. You were no longer reaching in the same way. You were no longer trying to force understanding. Something in you had surrendered the outcome to God. That surrender reached them as silence. And now the story explained why your silence felt so powerful. It was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of someone who had stopped begging to be seen. It was the silence of a heart that still cared but had remembered its worth. It was the silence of a soul saying, "I will not chase what is meant to recognize me." Your soulmate felt that truth with painful clarity. They understood that if they wanted a place in your life, they could no longer approach you with uncertainty disguised as caution. They could not continue offering fragments while expecting your full heart. They could not hide behind confusion forever. This was the first major change. They stopped seeing you as the person waiting for them. They began seeing you as the person they might need to rise to meet. And that difference changed everything. The story continued, and with every new detail, another illusion fell away. Your soulmate heard that you had spoken kindly about them even when you had every reason not to. They heard that you once defended their character when someone questioned their intentions. They heard that you believed there was goodness in them even during moments when their behavior confused you. This revelation affected them more than they expected. They had assumed your distance meant you had judged them completely. They had feared that you saw only their mistakes. But now they learned that even in your pain, you had not reduced them to their worst moment. You had held space for the possibility that they were struggling too. That compassion reached a place in them that had been closed for a long time. Your soulmate has wounds they do not easily speak about. There is a part of them that expects to be misunderstood, abandoned, or condemned once their imperfections are seen. So they protect themselves by pulling away first. They create confusion before anyone can get close enough to hurt them. They act detached when they are actually overwhelmed by the intensity of what they feel. The story about you confronted that pattern. It showed them that you had already seen pieces of their shadow and had not responded with cruelty. You did not demand that they be flawless. You simply wanted them to be truthful. For the first time, they understood that the connection they feared might actually be the place where healing could begin. But healing requires honesty. And honesty would require them to admit something they had been hiding even from themselves. They missed you. Not only your presence. They missed the version of themselves that appeared when they felt emotionally close to you. Around you, something in them became more awake. They felt more hopeful, more vulnerable, more alive. Even when the connection challenged them, it also reminded them that they were capable of feeling deeply. They had tried to replace that feeling with routine, distraction, and logic. But the story brought it all back. Your voice returned to their memory. Your expressions. The way certain conversations with you stayed in their thoughts long after they ended. The way you seemed to understand emotions they had never successfully explained to anyone else. And then they remembered one particular moment between you. A moment when you looked at them as if you knew they were hiding something. You did not pressure them. You did not accuse them. You simply gave them space, and in that space, they felt both exposed and safe. At the time, they did not know how to respond. Now they understand. You were waiting for honesty, not perfection. That realization became impossible to ignore. My child, you may be wondering why this truth is reaching you now. You may be asking why your soulmate had to hear your story from someone else instead of understanding you when you were standing directly before them. The answer is not that your words lacked value. The answer is that their heart was not ready then. People can hear truth before they are prepared to receive it. They can look directly at love and still interpret it through the lens of fear. Sometimes a message must return through another voice, at another time, after life has softened the resistance. This is what happened. The story met your soulmate at the exact moment their old beliefs were beginning to collapse. They had already been questioning choices they made. They had already been feeling the emptiness of avoiding what mattered. They had already begun sensing that something important was unfinished between you. Then your story arrived like a key. It unlocked a door they had been pretending did not exist. Behind that door was not only love. There was responsibility. They could no longer blame circumstances, timing, or other people for every distance between you. They had to acknowledge their own hesitation. They had to see where they had chosen safety over truth. This was difficult for them. There is a difference between missing someone and admitting that your own fear helped create the separation. Your soulmate had to confront that difference. They had to recognize that you may have been waiting for one honest step while they were waiting for every fear to disappear. But courage does not begin after fear vanishes. Courage begins when love becomes more important than fear. And the story made your soulmate ask whether their love had finally become strong enough. They did not answer immediately. Instead, they went quiet. The person who told the story noticed the change in them. They asked if everything was all right. Your soulmate said yes, but their voice carried a weight that had not been there before. They tried to act normal, yet inside them, something was moving too quickly to hide. They wanted to know more. They began asking careful questions about you. Not questions meant to gather gossip, but questions meant to correct the picture they had formed. They wanted to understand what you had been through. They wanted to know what you had said, how you had reacted, and why you had chosen silence. The storyteller answered only part of what they asked. There were details they hesitated to share. Details that did not belong to them. But even that hesitation made your soulmate more aware that your story contained deeper layers. They realized they had known your face but not the full journey behind it. They had felt your heart but not understood what it survived. And a strange tenderness began growing in them. They wished they could return to certain moments and respond differently. They wished they had listened more carefully. They wished they had asked what you needed instead of assuming you needed nothing. They wished they had recognized that strong people also long to be held with gentleness. Then something unexpected happened. Your soulmate defended you. Someone made a careless remark, repeating an old assumption about you. In the past, your soulmate might have stayed silent, unsure whether to get involved. But this time, the story was still alive inside them. They could not allow the incomplete version of you to remain unchallenged. They said, "That is not the whole truth." The room became quieter. Your soulmate did not reveal everything they had heard. They did not create conflict. But they spoke with a certainty that surprised even them. They explained that people often judge what they do not understand. They said that silence does not always mean guilt, coldness, or indifference. Sometimes it means someone is carrying more than they are ready to explain. In defending you, they heard their own heart speak. That moment mattered. Because before a person can openly choose love, they often begin by privately choosing truth. Your soulmate's defense of you was not yet the confession you deserve, but it was a sign that the inner change had already begun. They were no longer willing to let false interpretations shape how they saw you. The story had awakened loyalty. And loyalty, once awakened, begins demanding action. Later, when they were alone, they looked for a way to reach you. They opened a message thread. They read old words exchanged between you. They noticed how much remained unsaid between simple sentences. They typed something, erased it, typed again, and stopped. They were not afraid of sending a message. They were afraid of what the message might begin. Because once they spoke honestly, they knew they could not return to pretending. Once they acknowledged the connection, they would have to face the feelings they had buried. Once they asked for a real conversation, they might hear your pain, your disappointment, or perhaps the possibility that you had begun moving forward without them. Their fingers paused over the screen. And in that pause, they understood something profound. They were no longer deciding whether they cared about you. They were deciding whether they had the courage to let you know. That is where the second change began. Their heart had already chosen. Their mind was trying to catch up. My beloved, do not mistake delay for absence of feeling. But also do not allow another person's fear to make you question your value. Heaven is not revealing this to keep you trapped in waiting. This message is reminding you that truth moves in ways you cannot always see. You do not need to force the outcome. The story has already entered the place where it needed to go. Your soulmate has heard enough to begin seeing you differently. They have felt enough to begin questioning their silence. And they have remembered enough to understand that what exists between you cannot be dismissed as easily as they once hoped. But there is more. The person telling the story had not yet reached the final part. There was one last detail they had been reluctant to reveal. They looked at your soulmate and asked a question before continuing. It was a question so direct that your soulmate's breath caught for a moment. They asked, "Do you know why they never told you the truth themselves?" Your soulmate said nothing. The storyteller studied their face, as if deciding whether they were ready for the answer. Then they revealed that your silence had not come from a lack of trust. It had come from a promise you made, a promise connected to someone your soulmate knows. This changed the atmosphere completely. Your soulmate leaned forward. Their heart began beating faster. Until that moment, they believed the story was only about your kindness, your hidden pain, and the reasons behind your guarded heart. But now they realized the story was connected to them more directly than they had imagined. The promise you made had protected something in their life. Something they had never known was in danger. You had carried a burden that was never yours because revealing it too soon could have changed the way your soulmate saw someone close to them. You chose to wait. You hoped truth would surface without your intervention. And while you waited, you accepted the risk that your soulmate might misunderstand you. The storyteller's voice became quieter. Your soulmate asked, "What exactly did they protect me from?" There was a long pause. The answer was not given immediately. Because the truth involved a conversation, a decision, and a hidden motive that could change how your soulmate understood the past several months. It explained why certain people encouraged distance between you. It explained why a message never reached them. It explained why you suddenly stepped back when everything between you seemed ready to move forward. Your soulmate's thoughts began racing. They remembered the exact period when your energy changed. They remembered a cancelled plan, an unanswered question, and the